Good afternoon to our viewers in Germany and good morning to our viewers in the United States. Hello, I'm Steve Sokol, the president of the American Council on Germany, and I'd like to welcome you to today's Kaffeepause. This is our regular check-in with a journalist based in Berlin to talk about the news stories behind the headlines, and today we're joined by Malte Lehming from the Berlin daily Der Tagesspiegel. Malte, herzlich willkommen. It's always great to see you.
Thank you for having me, Steve.
So one of the traditions that you've introduced to the Cafe Pausa has been sharing some current headlines. And so I'd love to have you share with us a few of the top half of the front page of a few papers, and we can use that as a jumping off point for our conversation.
Okay, great. I picked four newspapers from today's edition. This is the Berliner Zeitung. Let me see if you can read the headline.
Mhm,
Yes, the headline is AfD ban. Brandenburg is skeptical. So that's about the whole discussion about whether the AfD, the far-right party in Germany, which climbs the poll up, should be banned. And this discussion is going on and on and on. So next is the left-wing Tageszeitung, very sarcastic. Is this
mhm,
Israel's exit strategy in showing destroyed buildings in Gaza? So very sarcastic headline. Um, the Gaza headline is as well with the conservative Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. As we can see, yeah, hundreds dead in Gaza. The picture shows the inauguration of Pope Leo, and that's the same with the Tagesspiegel. So my newspaper shows Pope Leo
mhm.
inauguration and Gaza as well. Yes, major offensive in Gaza is the title of it. So
So
these are the
those
headlines
are
of four newspapers.
So those are the main stories today, right? What's
Yeah.
going on in Gaza and the future of the Middle East. Of course, the very timely um, uh, first formal service by Pope Leo, which was attended by a number of world leaders. And of course, in terms of domestic politics, the banning of the potential banning of the AfD and the debate about that. Um, Obviously, these are all topics that concern the new German government that is crystallizing for all of us. If I am informed correctly, I think that Friedrich Merz went to Rome for Pope Leo's first service, and that there were some meetings there on the sidelines. He, of course, met with the Italian head of state, head of government, and they had some good conversations. Maloney. Um, why don't you start by sharing with us some of your first impressions of Friedrich Merz as a chancellor? He's had, a full agenda in terms of addressing domestic issues, but also has been doing quite a bit of international travel within Europe, first to Germany's neighbors, France and Poland, but also, of course, to Rome over the weekend.
Yes, we all remember the start, which was not the best you can have because he failed to have, as the first chancellor in German history, he failed to get the
Hmm.
absolute majority and only in the second round. But this shows how fragile, potentially fragile, the coalition could be if even members of the Union, CDU, CSU, and SPD, some of them, it was the anonymous election, so we don't know who it was, but that wanted to show him that his chancellorship should have some limits. Since then, he was traveling. You mentioned a lot of this to Paris first, to Warsaw, Brussels, Kiev, and now he's in Rome with Meloni. And this is a tribute to his aim to since Olaf Scholz in his chancellery was missed for the last 3 years on the European level, to the dismay of Emmanuel Macron, especially. So his first trip went to Paris and closing ranks with Macron, and then to Tusk in
Hmm.
Poland, and trying to revitalize this French, German, Polish Weimar Dreieck, as it was called, the Triangle of Weimar, And it was once a very lively thing because these three powers seem to be the motor of what's going on in the European Union. And Merz tries to establish himself as kind of a new European leader, especially towards Ukraine, weapon deliveries, maybe towards the transatlantic, to Donald Trump, the president of the United States. We see how this will evolve. And yeah, so I think his coalition is bound together not by a major political project. In his coalition treaty, there's nothing to find like about this. It's more bound together with the lack of alternatives. There is simply no other alternatives if you exclude the AfD for a coalition, and therefore with a sense of responsibility. But this is a very thin thing. So they call themselves the so-called Arbeitskoalition, the working coalition,
Hmm.
trying to avoid the impression that they're creating chaos and profiling themselves. But the incentives for both parties to profile themselves is quite high. I mean, the polling numbers are going down for Merz as well as for the coalition. There is pressure in between the CDU and CSU being tough on migration. Migration is still the topic, not only in Germany, but in Europe. But this will collide potentially with the SPD, who portray themselves as a human rights, more open to migration and sticking to European law. It might collide with European law, but the strong thing at the border and European fiction. You can hail the Weimar Dreieck with the Poland and France and Germany, but the visit in France in Poland
Hmm.
was overladen by frictions about the closed border policy, because then Poland will be left with the refugees by themselves, which were sent by Belarus to the eastern side into Poland. So they are quite nervous in Poland, and they just had an election as well, the presidential election. And I will not exclude that this topic of migration influenced the outcome of this election as well, and will put some pressure on the government of Tusk, of Donald Tusk.
Hmm.
So this is what I would consider his aim is the European Chancellor. He's traveling quite a lot to give the impression that he tries to achieve something. What he can achieve is something else to ask for. A lot will happen, will depend on the telephone call today between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. But because this will define maybe his role in Europe, being on the side of the weapon deliveries and fighting against Russia, or give peace a chance, as might be some members of the SPD will vote for.
One of the things that I saw in the German press today was that Merz made a point of being in touch with Trump ahead of the call with Putin, and that he had a number of other European leaders on the line, including Macron and Stammer and Meloni, and in this way, wants to show German leadership in trying to meet this current challenge. But of course, Mats has to balance some of the domestic challenges that Germany is facing with some of the international and foreign policy challenges that Germany is facing. Let's perhaps talk about some of the challenges. What are the biggest issues that you see facing this new coalition of Christian Democrats and Social Democrats?
For example, as you just mentioned, Ukraine. If Merz, I think it's a very, very delicate balance he has to keep. If Merz gives the impression that the Europeans try to lecture Donald Trump how to deal with Vladimir Putin, what they sometimes do, it might have a negative effect on all these talks. So I think he tries to avoid if it comes to weapons delivery, tries to avoid what kind of weapons should be delivered. So the word Taurus will not cross his mouth maybe for the next weeks or so. So this is delicate because there are, especially in the SPD, the Social Democratic Party, uh, a number of people who wanted to give diplomacy a chance, who tried to support Trump in giving diplomacy a chance, even if it is to the dislike of Volodymyr Zelensky from Ukraine. So this is a very delicate balance he has to keep, not to lecture Americans, but to be
Mhm.
firm in supporting Ukraine. And the other things are, for example, the budget. Here, the co-chancellor is Klingbeil, Lars Klingbeil. He is the finance minister. He has to lay down a budget in the next couple of weeks for this year and potentially for next year. And then the fight will begin. Um, Defense spending is not the issue because, as one of the last things the last Bundestag decided upon was to reform the so-called debt brake. And so they have some leverage in dealing with defense questions. But but on domestic terms, it means what do you want to strengthen? The health insurance or Pflege or yes. So the usual things will come up and the incentive for very small parties. I mean, we're talking about the SPD gaining 16% of the votes.
Yeah.
And the CDU-CSU gaining 28% of the votes, a very, very small majority in the Bundestag and no majority in the second chamber in the
Mhm.
Bundesrat, um, which is composed of coalitions from various parties, sometimes with the Greens, the Linke Partei, the left-wing party, and so on and so on. So very tricky, potentially very, and the question is because they started by being we want to show another face of a government than the former Olaf Scholz government with the Greens and the FDP. So avoiding chaos is the highest principle of this government. I'm not quite sure if they will be able to do that because budget, migration, and Ukraine weapon delivery, these are the three topics I would say have the most potential to be disputed in the government.
And so let's talk about the budget a little bit more because because of the early election and the collapse of the previous government, there is no budget for 2025. And the as you mentioned, the new finance minister who also serves as vice chancellor, Lars Klingbeil, has to produce a new budget for 2025. And I had heard that he hopes to have this by the 25th of June, but then others are saying that we probably won't be able to see a budget for 2025 until the fall. And this all against the backdrop of Lars Klingbeil telling each ministry that they need to engage in financial cuts and cutbacks. I'm sure that that's not going over especially well.
Right. Right. And he's absolutely new in the job. He has to start learning how to manage financial questions from scratch. He was involved in all the coalition talks, had no time to get acquainted with the difficult question. I mean, finance questions are the most difficult in the budget.
Hmm.
So to solve them, and the balance between the needs of the typical social democratic party, raising minimum wage, and all these social topics that social democrats are more close with, against what the conservative majority of the CDU-CSU wants, will be very, very tricky. And so he's new in the job. He is the strong figure in the SPD, together with Defense Minister Boris Pistorius, who is the
Hmm.
leading figure if it comes to the polls nationwide. And all polls can go up, and Boris Pistorius polls stay the same on very high level. And so these two figures will be the most. I think if they manage to keep the SPD calm and on board, the government, the coalition government, will have a chance.
Hmm. Where do you see the biggest sticking points when it comes to the budget? Because certainly the dissolution of the Schuldenbremse, the debt brake, makes life a lot easier. The huge financial commitment to defense and infrastructure over the next 10 years, I think should facilitate the two parties coming together to come up with a budget, particularly after the coalition talks. And then hopefully there would be enough support in the Bundestag for these priorities. But where do you see the biggest issues in putting together a budget right now?
The biggest problem is economy. Economy is doing bad. The prognoses are worse even for this year and next year. So this means the financial leverage is low. And so there have to be cuts. And Lars Klingbeil is stressing this whenever he's on the microphone. There has to be cuts in almost every sphere of it. Will it be education? I doubt it. Education is more or less a lender Sache. It's supposed to be solved by the lender. Um, but on health issues, healthcare, caring for the elderly, um, caring for um, single mothers, single fathers with one child or two children, and infrastructure. Building is a high priority. Cheap rents, the rents are skyrocket in big cities, not on the countryside, but in big cities like Berlin, Hamburg, Frankfurt, Munich. Very hard to. This is a problem for students. So in every sphere, the social democrats think about in social terms, not in economic terms. There will be, this will stress the both coalition parties.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, this is obviously something to follow. I guess, how quickly do you think there will be a budget? Do you think that the June 25th date that Klingbeil is talking about is realistic? That's a little bit more than just a month away.
I know, but I think it should be realistic, and I think therefore it is.
Hmm.
They have to show that they are willing to solve problems, that they are not the chaos coalition that they always said the Scholz government was about, that they see responsibility to solving problems, to vote for a budget, and so on and so on. The pressure is so high and the expectation is so high from the public
Hmm.
that any delay would be seen as okay, they can't do it either. So, and this is, we haven't spoken yet about the AfD. This is the impression that gives the far right party their upcoming, that the all the elites, the establishment as they might be called, they cannot do it if it's the CDU, SPD, FDP, whosoever. They are unable to solve our problems and to come to terms. Instead, they are fighting against each other. So this kind of impression they have to fight against, and therefore I think it should be realistic, therefore it is realistic.
Hmm. I'd like to get to the AFD in just a moment, but before we do that, because I think it ties in as well, I'd like to maybe ask you a little bit about the economic challenges facing Germany at the moment. Of course, there's a new minister, Minister Reiche, who's taking on this role. She has a big task ahead of her in terms of trying to revitalize the German economy and create, an environment for that. Can you talk a little bit about what some of the expectations might be for the economics ministry under this new leadership and in the new administration?
I think the most question marks has to be put on global terms. What is the future of the tariffs
Yeah.
that President Trump has against European goods? And this is the most important question that Germans expect an answer about, because the whole export nation, as Germany likes to call themselves, delivery of cars to the US, aluminium and steel, and so on and so on. This is something the German economy is based upon. So everything about the German economy will be in question if the tariffs will stay at 40% or 60% or whatsoever. I
Hmm.
think this is the utmost importance of Minister Reiche, to try to find some bridges towards the US government, to try to solve the problem together with the Europeans. There
Yeah.
should be a European answer to that. But but in preparation for that, Minister Reiche has to find their partners in the US. I'm not sure if she already has some of them.
Yeah. So several people have expressed interest in hearing a little bit more about the AfD. I mean, of course, the Office for the Protection of the German Constitution has expressed its tremendous concern about the AfD. There are debates swirling about a potential ban of this party. That could, of course, increase the popularity of the party for some of the reasons that you outlined just now. But this is a source of discussion within and between all of the political parties at the moment. Can you talk a little bit about the situation with the AfD at the moment?
Yes, the AfD is still doing very strong, especially in the polls, but in the last election as well. They now have, I think, 180 members of parliament. It's a strong bloc. They can do a lot of things in parliament. They try to reinvent themselves, not so much anti-American. They try to close ranks with Donald Trump. Elon Musk supported the AfD publicly. I think JD Vance did the same, trying to be on the side of the AfD. So I think they see more of a future for themselves with closing ranks with the United States and not so much with Russia.
Mhm.
They try to separate themselves from the Russia ties, which is not doing so good in the east of Germany because the eastern parts of the AfD, they were much closer to Russia than the western parts of the AfD. They were always, I wouldn't say transatlanticist, but more transatlantically oriented
Hmm.
than the eastern part. So there will be some frictions in between the AfD because of that. It's still doing strong. The one and most important topic for them is migration.
Hmm.
They will try to hammer the CDU, CSU in terms that they always be too weak. Nevertheless, they can do what they want, but they'll always be too weak with migration, not closing the borders, being too much on the European side, humanitarian side, and so on and so on. So migration is still the number one topic that keeps the AfD alive, and this puts pressure on the CDU CSU to show it is the party. For Merz, he said on day one, I will try to solve the problem. So that's what he did, securing the borders and the new interior minister, Dobrindt, on the same day that Merz traveled to Poland, even put more restrictions on that. So right now you can be in a traffic jam on the border for 3 hours and then your papers are controlled for one more hour. And this puts a lot of strains for the whole Schengen concept, this concept of open borders in between the European Union. And it's not quite clear if all of what Germany does right now, or from the order of the government, is in accordance with European law. So there
Hmm.
will be friction, and the AfD will say this is what we always said about the European Union. If you're in the European Union, you're bound by the rules. So go out of it. Let's get rid from the European Union. So this I don't see the AfD going down in the polls in the foreseeable future. So
Hmm.
all parties have to deal with this ghost or threat or whatever you call. I think the ban, this is my personal opinion, I think the ban is a bad idea because
Hmm.
it gives the impression that on regular political terms, you can't fight them. So you have to ban them. And this is against my, let's say, democratic instincts.
Hmm. I guess
Um,
I have two questions to that. One is, a couple of German politicians, I think from the CDU, have said that we have to govern better as we try to address the challenge of the AfD. Do you think that this coalition is in a position to meet the challenges and concerns that we've talked a little bit about that voters have and can govern better in order to win back votes that are going to the AfD?
If the coalition does not give the impression to fight against themselves for weeks and weeks and weeks, if are able to finalize a budget, if they are able to bring down the number of irregular migration, And I'm not talking about 5% or 10%, more or less, I'm talking about 50% maybe. If they give the impression that they have some, let's say, coherent Ukraine policy, that they I mean, the general mood is concerning the Ukraine. There have to be diplomacy, but if there isn't, there have to be some. Yes, we have to support Ukraine against Russia.
Mhm.
But both of these strains, supporting with weapon deliveries and diplomacy, strengthening both of these things, is one of the main tasks this coalition has to have. If they manage to be as close as they can, to be as effective as they can, and to be as coherent as they can, I would say yes, yes, they have a chance.
Mhm. One of the things that we've all been following fairly closely is this announcement by the Office for the Protection of the Constitution at the beginning of May, which characterized the AfD as a extremist party. This report was just leaked a couple of days ago. It's over 1,100 pages long. Do you think the leak of this report could have any impact on whether the party will be banned or not?
Some colleagues went through all these 1,100 pages, and what they found is that most of the allegations are publicly known sentences. It is not behind closed doors or some
Hmm.
secret plans that they have. This is what they publicly say, and since what they say in public, which is not banned, which is free speech, let's say it's like this, even though we don't like it, but it's free speech. How can you ban a party because they are using the right to free speech? This is a very tricky question, and my impression is the best argument you have is to, if you can't fight them, ban them.
Hmm.
And I'm not quite sure if this is the right answer to it.
In a number of conversations I've had recently, I've said that th this election in 2025 was critical, but that the election in 2029, if this government holds that long, is existential. And somebody just submitted a question asking what happens if the AfD is the largest party in the next German election.
That's a tough question. I have to admit, I never thought about that far, that the AfD is the strongest. But if they are the strongest party, they can have the chance. But an absolute majority, I mean, above 50%. This would be kind of a miracle that nobody expects right now. So I can't see in the foreseeable future the AfD is able to manage that kind of figure. I would say on local terms, there are collaborations between democratic parties and the AfD.
Hmm.
For example, if you have a strong AfD showing in a little town in Saxony and you have to decide upon a street or a school building or things like this, why not to vote with them if what they consider being smart is smart? So just on principle, because it's an extremist right-wing party, and we as Germans, with our history, never again want to collude ourselves with the right-wing extremism. I think this is too weak.
Yeah.
They should be forced to show what they can.
Yeah.
What I would say, if they have managed to build good schools and good streets and the garbage system in a little town in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, they should do it.
Hmm.
Show if, or if all what you can do is to be a demagogue concerning migration and migrants and things like this then you're weak.
Hmm.
Show that you're able to have practical policy.
In terms of migration, somebody submitted a question asking how other EU member states are reacting to stronger or stricter border controls from Germany.
Especially Germany neighbors are worried. It started in Poland the day after Merz was elected in the Bundestag as the chancellor, and after his trip to France, he went to Poland, and the Polish are very nervous about it. But not just they. The Swiss are, the Czechs are, the Luxembourgers are. So I would say a number of because German policy will be to pull them back if they
Mhm.
come at the border and have no clear right to ask for asylum. They have to be pulled back. But the Dublin Agreement says a asylum seeker has to apply for asylum in the country they landed first in the European Union. So this, in principle, means Germany never will have any kind of migrants because our borders are with European countries,
Right.
and so this is very tricky. So I would say the countries that are most affected by illegal migration: Italy, Greece, Spain, the Mediterranean countries, and Poland, because there's the Balkan route stranding through going up to Poland. And they are the most being worried about the German way of
Hmm.
doing it. And it's an anti-European. I mean, they always say that they want to do it in accordance with European partners and in close cooperation and things like this and so on. But the nervousness on the side of our neighbors prove the opposite.
Hmm. So, I guess what are your thoughts on the future of the core countries in Europe, the Weimar Triangle, France, Germany, and Poland coming closer together? Of course, at a time when there's a new government in place in Germany, still trying to find its way. There are elections that just took place in Poland, but will take place again, the runoff election in Poland, and then France's somewhat lame duck President Macron. How do you see these three countries working together is, I guess, one question. And another is, do you see Mats being in a position to strengthen the ties with France, and particularly that Franco-German engine that has been so important for the EU's development?
I think yes. I think Friedrich Merz is committed to the European Union and is committed to the Weimar Triangle.
Hmm.
This is one thing he wants to, and he is committed to transatlantic ties. I think these are the pillars of his chancellery to see. And so he will do everything he can to strengthen not just the Weimar Triangle, but the German-France relation as well. I think Macron welcomes this a lot because he sometimes in the last 3 years felt alone with all his thinking and things that he wanted to do. Donald Tusk government in Poland has the next election, I think, in 2 years. So there is a time of 2 years' time. There is a presidential election, and it might be won, and if it comes to runoff, by the more conservative and right-wing extremist one in Poland. But it's not the presidential election like in the United States, where the president has the real power. He has some veto power, but the government is still run by Donald Tusk, who is in the same European family as the CDU-CSU with his party.
Hmm.
So there are things they have in common, and so I'm quite optimistic about the Weimar Triangle and the German-France relationship. It won't happen in 2 weeks or 2 months.
Hmm.
It's something that is built upon with personal relationships, especially with France. We saw the Kohl Mitterrand, we saw the Helmut Schmidt and Giscard d'Estaing, and all these personal relationships were so important. I I have the feeling I saw how Merz was greeted by Macron in Paris, and it seems they liked each other and they have something they share a world. Um, yeah.
Of course, that's very positive. Maybe one last question from my end, which is today, of course, there's a summit taking place between the United Kingdom and the EU. This is the first time since Brexit that the two have had a formal summit like this. Keir Starmer, of course, is in London, and Ursula von der Leyen is here as well for these talks. The primary focus is on defense and security issues, but there are also documents that are supposed to be signed today that focus on the economy and allowing um, the UK to access European procurement deals for arms production. Um, Obviously, this is, you know, early stages in terms of knowing what comes out of that. But how have these talks been followed in Berlin? Is there some sense of optimism at bringing the UK back after Brexit?
I don't know if bringing the UK back, it's like bringing the UK back without calling it that way.
Hmm.
I mean, you have to. I think the German government really supports closing ranks with Great Britain, even given the fact that many Brits regretted their vote of the Brexit vote from that time, and it brought a lot of problems to Great Britain. And so the task right now is not just with defense issues, but defense issues are on the top of the issues they have to talk, but not just with them, but more on practical arrangements between the European Union and Great Britain. They want to find a new level of the acceptance of Brexit, but not acceptance of Brexit. I mean, just
Hmm.
trying to work together without calling it the Great Britain to be a member of the European Union again.
Hmm.
So this is more than symbolism. It is like bringing back the prodigal son, if you may say so, and without saying like this and without being triumphal about, as we told you so, Brexit is a bad idea. So don't
Right.
do that and be on terms. Yeah.
But it really seems to be with a new leader in the UK who seems to be committed to Europe, really trying to underscore that relationship. I mean, I think that the photographs of the European leaders on the night train from Kiev
Yeah.
said a lot. And the fact that Friedrich Merz, as the new German chancellor, was there, that Keir Starmer was there, I think that was an important visual statement, if you
Yes,
will,
yes, I think so
to
too. And
the
Keir Starmer can afford to do that because there's no real strong pro-Brexit sentiment
right.
against him. The criticism is not so much about the train to Kiev and building bridges with the European Union.
Yeah. Um, as we wrap up, is there anything that we have not talked about that we should talk about?
There is a telephone call waiting between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, and we can't talk about this because we don't know the content what will come out of it. But we're all expectantly looking forward to because it will be in supposed in 20 minutes from now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Last time, Vladimir Putin just spent another hour talking to some other people because he went before he went to the phone. Maybe this time he will be on time. Let's
We
see.
will see. We
Next
will
time.
see what happens with that call. Obviously, it's a call that's being watched very closely in Europe and around the world. And my understanding is that Friedrich Merz spoke with the president prior to that call, and that he hopes to speak with the president after the call as well. So we hope to learn what was discussed.
We will be smarter in some hours from now.
Exactly, exactly. Well, herzlichen Dank. Many, many thanks. Malte, it is
Thank you,
always
Steve.
great to talk to you. I really appreciate your taking the time to speak with us. And I look forward to having you back for another Kaffeepause at some point in the not too distant future.
Thank you so much, and bye bye to New York, or for whoever who is online right now.